the square footage of that building is 62 years old. And then our high school, which a lot of people refer to as the new high school, is already 29 years old. And for all of us that are homeowners, you know what happens in a building after 30 years. The major components start to fail and need to be replaced. When you look at commercial buildings, that's typically a shorter lifespan than you can get away with in a residential setting just because of the amount of people that use it. And we'll dig into these buildings a little bit more as we go. Just to give you a recap of kind of what we've done already and the things that I'm going to be referencing. One of the major reports that we work through to help us long-range plan and decide what our priorities should be is a CISA 10 facility audit report that was performed in 2014. Now I know that's 10 years ago. That report cost $35,000 to do at that point. I don't think that we need to spend that money again based on the amount of money that we put into those buildings has been so little. A lot of those problems still exist today. So I don't think it's wise to necessarily do another full report that would cost us probably $50,000, $60,000 today. I don't think that would be a wise spend, and I'll explain a little bit as we go through that. Then in June of 2002, we did a district strategic planning process, which kind of got us starting to think, what do we need to do, how do we need to address that, which ultimately led into this task force. Also out of that planning session, one of the big questions that came up was, what is the capacity of our buildings? So we contracted an architect to help us analyze our buildings to give us an idea of, is the square footage appropriate for how we're using it and the number of kids that we're putting in it, and we'll go through that too. Then this spring, in May of 2023, we did what we call staff listening sessions. So at the end of the school days, the board members and administration that could make it attended each one of the 5 buildings and listened to what the staff had to say. What are their headaches, what's going good, what needs to be fixed, what their thoughts are, and we compiled those thoughts and we will discuss those as we go too. Again, the first one will be the CISA 10 facility study, and yes, as I said, it is 10 years old. Couple highlights that I want to go through on this is a 120-some page document, and we can dive into any of it if we need to. At that time, there was 7 elementary schools that they analyzed. If you remember, Crestwood, Pleasant View, Spring Valley, and I believe Mattoon, thank you, were still operational at that time. So we've updated a few of the comments to reflect that, but basically we have 3 very small elementary schools, and they say that way compared to other districts. Most districts will have larger square footage, more tracks, more students within one building. It's more efficient to run a larger building with more tracks, just how numbers work. Ours are very small compared to what the norms are and the standards today.
Jake, can you explain what you mean by a track?
A track is say if you have first graders and you have 2 first grade classrooms in a building, that would be a 2-track building. So right now, our elementaries are 4K through 3, and they each have 2 tracks in them. In some cases, North does not. Okay.
We're all 2.
Okay. When we did consolidate, we did have a couple of 3, so like the 3rd grade might have been 3 tracks, so there's 3 classrooms. So essentially that boils down to, say you have 20 students in a classroom, so there would be 40 first graders at a elementary school that has 2 tracks of first grade. Does that make sense? Did I explain that? Okay. How our elementaries are currently set up creates a lot of challenges from the facility maintenance based on their age, staffing, meaning that tracks in a building, you may only have, 15 kids in this classroom, where funding-wise, we should have equal classrooms closer to that 18 to 20. But since we don't have all the kids in one location, we actually may have to add another teacher based on how they're split up versus if they were all in the same building and we could efficiently split up classrooms to the proper size. And then transportation perspectives for the district, and that's just when you look at how we have to coordinate our busing, it causes a lot of extra redundancies that could be streamlined if we had less facilities. Facilities are in a condition that is in line with their age and good maintenance, but a large percent of the equipment, fixtures, and materials are past their expected useful life. There's a chart that I'll show later on that will talk through that a little bit. In their opinion, that considering the large amount of renovation necessary at the elementary schools, parts of the middle school that would need to be addressed, new construction must be considered. At that time, capital cost for building a single elementary facility that would replace the existing ones was budgeted at $24.5 million. That was for the purposes of the 2012 referendum. I bring that up because that's important in the respect that to do that same facility nowadays, or in today's costs, would likely be probably double that. I say that lightly, I don't want to say that that's the magic number, but looking at how construction costs and inflation and price per square foot for that construction, it likely will be double. So the point of me saying that is the cheapest time to do something is today. The longer we kick this down the road, the more expensive it's going to be. That's just the way inflation works.
Jake, by the doubling, you mean an equivalent size to replace rather than a big facility to house all, correct? I just want to
Correct.
clarify, okay.
Yep, relatively
Okay.
close, yeah. Might be a little bit different, but relatively the same size facility would be twice that price nowadays. There's been a lot of talk in different past task forces and referendums that everybody wants to know, why can't we just bring these buildings, meaning the elementaries, up to current standards? Why don't we just stick the money in to keep them? We can certainly put money into those buildings and bring them up to some better standards, but the way that the buildings are designed, if we don't do major renovation to them and add on, we will only be bringing those buildings back up to an educational setting that was compliant with in the 1960s. Education has changed over the years, and we can put money in there, but we're still stuck in that setting. We're still stuck in the 1960s era that the schools were built. There's just a lot of differences in how education has evolved through the years that these buildings are not conducted to anymore. And we'll talk about that more as we go through. We're going to do a facilities tour next meeting at North Elementary, so we'll be able to dive into that and really show you what we mean by some of that stuff. But we just don't have the space, and the buildings are not set up to handle what education needs to do in a current setting. Obviously, operating efficiencies need to be taken into account, and there's efficiency gains and therefore reduction in annual operating costs due to the consolidation, for reasons that we've kind of already touched on with the staffing and the maintenance and utilities and transportation. One of the big picture recommendations that they brought up is all these buildings, including the high school and middle school, have pressing needs for spending. When you start looking at anything from, roofing or flooring, doors, ventilation, those are just things that wear out over time. You start looking at our high school And, you know, I think that it's in good shape overall. I think that we've done a great job maintaining it over the 29 years. But when you look at this room, you know, this is original carpet. This carpet should have been replaced. We have delaminated parts of it that have now created trip hazards. It creates safety concerns. You walk down our halls and you start looking at things like doorways or ceiling tile. They're just banged up. The wood laminate on the doors is peeling off. The flooring is starting to crack where the expansion joints are. Tiles are shifting. Over the years, those things just wear. You go into our bathrooms and the fixtures are, some of them are cracked. I mean, there's just little things that start adding up. And that's what happens when you don't have a financial plan to maintain these buildings the way that they need to be. They start snowballing on you, and then you get so far behind that you can't get caught up. And unfortunately, we're starting to get there with this building, and this is our newest building. Again, I just want to stress that, I mean, we could follow the recommendations that were in that CISA plan. We could spend tens of millions of dollars to bring those buildings up to current standards, replace different items that are worn out. But again, it will not change the fact that that school remains a 1960s era school and will not meet the learning needs of today or the future. And we need to focus on what learning environment we're providing for our kids.
So you mentioned the $10 million. To bring it up to 2023 standards, just off the top of your head, what would the dollar amount be?
That's probably really difficult to answer.
It
Yeah.
is, and
Yeah.
what happens when you look at that building and you start trying to put the areas in that you need, you're gonna reduce the number of students that you can house there. And it's gonna get to a point where you're gonna have a single grade at one of those buildings to provide the resources that you need. And you're going to need to add some square footage on. And as we go through these different sites, we'll talk about the size of them and the fact that some of them can't be added onto very easily. So we'll cover that a little bit more,
But to your question, I think that's something we anticipated coming into this first meeting, is that, because that typically happens is when we work with Facilities Task Force, the first questions that people start to have is like, well, how much money would it take, right, to address all of our needs? And we always try to push you to think about, let's really get clear about what our most pressing needs are first, and let that dictate what the cost would be to address those needs. So we're gonna ask you to try to hold on that, even though that's just natural, right? Like, that's the first instinct we have, is like, how much? Just tell us how much. And we don't know yet, because we'll need to really push on those needs first, and then work with either an architect group or a construction group to tell us what it would take for cost.
This is a document that a number of you have probably seen. This is hooked to a Fund 46 that we have that is supposed to be for capital improvement projects. This is the most immediate needs, and I say that very lightly because this is just the tip of the iceberg. A number of the items on here address health and safety issues. They don't even address learning environments. And that worries me. We can't even afford health and safety items to where we can even have a conversation about learning environment. That statement itself just drives me crazy every time I think about this. These are items that should have been done. This is stuff that should automatically be built into our budget, that we can afford to replace these items on a regular basis so that we don't create safety and health concerns, and so that we can focus on learning environments and education. But we can't. we are in such a bad financial setting when it comes to maintenance. We cannot focus on even the basics. One of them that I heard tonight, and I'd like to bring up because everybody in the community drives through our parking lots, right? Not everybody walks into this room and sees the condition of the carpet, and I understand that. But when you look at our parking lots, they are embarrassing from curb appeal, I heard that. We should have curb appeal, we should be proud of our buildings. They're a safety hazard, people have fallen and got hurt. That's a liability concern for our district, and we can't afford to replace them. I mean, I had the road crew come in and do some patching, but that's only temporary. When those parking lots get in that bad shape, a lot of that patching lasts maybe a year. Next year, it's gonna look the same way, and it's gonna keep getting worse. The number that I have on here just for the high school is 1.6 million. And I know that that was kind of asked about last meeting, so I wanna expand on how I came to that number. We have 6,000 feet of curb line. I work with, people from the city that do, when they price out any of this work, I try to get the numbers so that I can keep my numbers up to date. Just in curb line, we have $160,000. Sidewalk or concrete paving, like in front of the buildings, we have 42,000 square feet. To rip that out and replace it, that's gonna be $420,000. Asphalt, we have 306,000 square feet. To replace that, we're talking $735,000. Those are numbers that I've compiled probably over the last 5 years at different times. I can't price that every single year, right? But I can follow trends of construction, and at a 0.4 or 4%, 0.04 inflation rate, which I think is probably on the low side given the last few years that we've gone through. If you take those numbers and roll that forward, that's where I get to the $1.6 million. We'll never have that in the budget. I can't even begin to think to how we could plan to touch that with the budget I have. And then we have to prioritize it over learning environments so that we don't have someone get hurt. So then the learning environments take the back seat. I mean, we're in a bad spot, and it drives me, it almost makes me sick when we talk about this stuff. But anyways, my point is, we have over millions and millions of dollars just in health and safety things, and we haven't even touched the rest of the items that go into what we do for facilities.
So, I don't know, is there like a code violations or anything that we're up against as far as the facilities themselves where
That's a great question.
we're not in line?
Some areas I would say that we were in, and that code is a tough word. I know that some people understand it and some people have different meanings of it, but there's standards that we have to follow for, say, indoor air quality. We have to turn over the air inside of a building so many times. That's why, part of why these buildings seem like, even tonight, it doesn't seem like it's cool, is because we're literally, you know, the outdoor ambient air temperature is like 85 degrees right now. We're sucking air off of the roof essentially, because that's where our air handler intakes are. So that's probably 95 or hotter because it's a black roof up there, right? So we have to suck all that air inside to have oxygen levels for an occupied building. We're required to do that by code, right? When we talk about air quality, our elementary schools were certainly out of code when it came to that. Over the last 5 years, the board has graciously gave me about $750,000 per elementary building to update both the HVAC system and the electrical services. So we have met our indoor air quality requirements in those locations. That doesn't mean that those systems are what they should be. Again, the technology used in those buildings, we can't we can't put the most efficient equipment in there because those buildings just are not built to handle it. Normally you'd have an air handler set up with forced air that would feed large areas of the building. The way those buildings are set up, we don't have room for ductwork to run. So we still have unit vents that were designed for that building in 1960. So we've come up to code as far as indoor air quality is concerned by circulating more, providing an exhaust side to it. We've got those air exchanges, but we're still not an efficient setup, and it does not regulate the temperature of the building very well at all. So, does that,
Yeah, no,
I just want to be clear
that sums it up.
we're addressing those standards as best we can,
Right.
but there's limitations to do that. Carol?
My question really is directed toward Donovan Group. When we formulate all this, and it's obvious that the formula set up in 1990 is put us at a disadvantage. When you are summarizing this, will you be able to come up with something that we can use to give to our legislature and say, you need to relook at this because you're hurting small districts?
Yeah.
You're killing small districts.
Yeah.
So that's something that you will be able to provide us with.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
They will, and I gotta give a shout out to John Humphreys, is an employee of the district, and he went up to the funding conference, I believe in Lakeland this year. And he made one heck of a presentation, and I think that did result in the governor's budget of giving us that extra $1,000 per kid. So Donovan can help us do more, but we are trying. I mean, the board talks about it all the time, and that's what we need. We need legislatures to help us on it, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tom, did you have a question?
Was there any money like provided through COVID for indoor air quality? Like, you know?
There was certainly money provided through COVID. The initial intent of that money was to supplement the educational process to get kids caught back up due to the deficiencies of not being in school. So a lot of that money was spent on educational needs, people, programs, things like that.
Sure.
That money definitely does qualify for some, I'd say capital improvements such as HVAC or anything ventilation related. And we are hoping to use I know we're gonna use some, but I'm hoping for more to be used on that middle school windows project.
Well, just for like, you know, on the HVAC side for air quality, is there ultraviolet light or like Remy Halo stuff that goes through the peroxide stuff to help kill bacteria? I mean, schools are obviously
Yeah.
a place to get sick, you know?
We looked through, I think I looked through 3 or 4 different types of things, from light to the electrical charging, the atoms, to kill stuff. I mean, we've looked at a lot of them, priced out a lot of them, and, you know, I discussed that with the board. And it's tough, again, to prioritize spending money on technology like that, even though it's a good spend. But when you have, like the windows we're replacing in the middle school are from 1980. They're wood residential windows. Most people don't make 40 years out of their home windows.
Right.
These are residential windows. for
I just
a
look at
residential setting.
all the money that was wasted in COVID, countrywide, and you can't put better indoor quality for public facilities, including, I don't care if it's a school or whatever, you know, when you have that, you know, when a disease is gonna spread, it's gonna spread through air quality.
Yep.
I think when this place was built, so there was, and get me wrong, but the air conditioning thing back then, I think was that a vote on, and then it got, so, I mean, what is all air conditioned in the building?
Okay, so I don't know how it was determined what was put in or not, but I do know that basically a good way to think about it is any room that has an outdoor window does not have air conditioning. Any room that, or sorry, I said that wrong. Any room that does not have a window has air conditioning. any room with an outside window does not, thinking that you could just open the window to provide ventilation and, you know, have airflow to provide that cooling feel. Now, on top of that, the design that the building was built with and still has today is they all have individual supplies. So this center core of the second floor has an air handler that has air conditioning in it that supplies these rooms. The return for this air conditioned space and this air handler, the entire building is a plant. So they just suck air out of wherever. So you're literally mixing all the air inside the building on your return. So when you look at why the air conditioning doesn't seem to work very well, when you're mixing 95-degree air off the roof for your fresh air with whatever probably 90-degree air from the other un-air conditioned spaces, and you return all that air through air handlers, it's gonna have a toll on your air conditioning. So to fix that isn't a very easy task. You're literally installing a new system.
My main question was really, did the US government have anything to help air quality for schools? You know, that's basically.
They gave us a lump sum of money that could qualify for a number of things, and each district decided how to spend it. I personally think that the most important thing was trying to get the educational stuff brought back up, and I know that we made decisions to try and do that. I don't really want to get into whether those were the right decisions or not, but there is some money left from that we are sticking into capital improvement. I wish it was more, because I'm selfish that way, but. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Well, I think we've kind of beat the.
Yeah, I think- yeah, I
although
think-
we need to spend a lot of time there.
I think one of the things we want to share with, about the high school and the middle school, we decided to leave with that because we recognize that the elementary schools is where the most pressing concerns are. But we did want to just like share this information with you. So again, you'll get a copy of the slide deck that has all this for you.
So I do just want to highlight that this current building is about 214,000 square feet. The middle school is approximately 160,000 square feet. When we start looking at plans, you know, a lot of people question whether the middle school is a good building to invest in or not. And I will answer that in yes, it is a good building to invest money in for a couple of reasons. The way the structure was built is much, much more robust and will withstand the test of time compared to our elementary buildings. The level of construction was just different. That building has a lot better bones. It has an addition that was in '98, which is cafeteria / gym, IMC, and food service, which are some of the most expensive square footages to build when you look at new construction. And then just the overall cost of 160,000 square feet. To replace that square footage, again, just rough guesstimation numbers, you're talking that you're gonna spend $45 million to replace that building. And that's not, in my opinion, where we should be focusing the money on. So I would say for now, we need to keep that middle school. There's good bones there, there's good stuff to it. Does it need work? Yeah. Windows being one example. There's stuff that we need to do to that facility, but I can't justify trying to replace it at this point. And I'll explain where I would.
I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
So, was it, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, that when, so it was, as far as I know, it was East in the middle school, I don't know about the other two elementaries. But when they did over at East, they had what was it? It's where they planted all that grass and whatnot. And they put the curb over there in the parking lot. In my opinion, that was just the most idiotic place to do that. They could have spent that money on something that could have helped the air quality or the buildings themselves, etc. I could give you an entire damn list of where they could have spent that money versus the blasted curbside that they put on the parking lot there. And over at the middle school, I think they did the same thing that's behind the school going towards the south. And I'm not saying it's the board's fault, but at the same time, that money could have been somewhere else that could have actually done good, in my opinion.
I get your point. The reason that we invested in the green spaces was because we had none at those schools. And if you look back at when we consolidated from the 3 elementary schools that were in the country and brought them in town, that was a big sore point for a lot of the community that came to those task force meetings during that time. And they insisted that we invest in those playgrounds and make green space the best that we can. So I get your point, but there was a lot of participation, and the people that participated in those task force meetings at that time, that was what came out of it. So that's why these task forces are important. They help guide the board. So you guys being here tonight and multiple nights to come, it's important, because what you think we should do, we're trying to listen to everybody. And we can't do everything, and I think that maybe hindsight, you have a good point. But when you have these community engagement sessions and you're told that that's what they want, you have to try and follow that. I mean, you have to use your better judgment and balance that to some extent too. But I think that highlights 2 things: how important the community engagement is, and 2, how important getting our fiscal picture in order so that we can properly, we shouldn't have to try and find money to provide indoor air quality. That should be a given. That money should be there, built into the budget year after year. We shouldn't even have to discuss if we're going to improve indoor air quality. But when you don't have a budget to support that, these are the tough decisions you end up in. So I agree with you.
And then one more thing, because on East Elementary, I live right off the lower left-hand corner there, and what they could have done with that money, like I said, with the green space, is that they could have replaced that side or part of where they put that green space, and they could have upgraded the basketball hoops. They could have upgraded the parking, or not the parking lot, the blacktop there to make it not trip hazard, things like that, and make it an actual court where these kids could actually shoot hoops at.
We did replace some blacktop in there.
And that's great, but and as far as I know, that's great, and I like the green space, and it's a great part of it, but that could have been used at a different place where it was actually needed, because the picture right there is a green spot towards the east. If you look at it right behind the whatever that building is. And that's probably perfect for those kids.
When you look into the studies, it's not even, what we have for green space isn't even a fraction of what the kids should have.
Okay.
It really is.
I mean,
It's so inadequate as a whole property, it's just really bad. And I get your point, and I'm not trying to disregard your thought.
No,
I agree, I would have loved to spend that money elsewhere, when you have so many needs, no matter what. you
Because
pick,
North
it's gonna be
Elementary,
wrong.
that's where that green space could have been. I mean, as far as I know, they don't really have a green space. I mean, I haven't been in there in probably a couple of years.
They have more green space than East does.
Oh,
but
okay.
Still not even close to what they need.
And then what about West?
Let's go through.
Let's go through them.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll show you. So, yeah, when we get to East Elementary, again, the site acre is 2.5, and the square footage of the building is 21,000 square feet. This is going to be, these are comments that were done out of that CISA 10 report. Small size of the lot does not allow for any green space, and the asphalt that does cover the lot is disregarded or degrading in several spots. Exterior door, brick, soffit, casement windows are in various states of disrepair due to age and wear and tear. And then the comments about the electrical infrastructure. If you remember, I did mention that we upgraded the services to those buildings, and we did the distribution panels within those buildings. But the wiring that goes into the classrooms, both at the elementaries and large portions of our middle school, are all still original. And when you think back to, parts of our middle school that were built in 1924, they ran literally one circuit down a dividing wall of the classroom and put an outlet on this side of the wall for this classroom, and on the same circuit was an outlet on this side of the wall for the same class, or for that classroom. That's not, it's not nearly enough what we need, and we've tried to add circuits to do stuff that ends up being surface mount because we have concrete walls. It's just, all the branch wiring from the panels out in those buildings really needs some focus. North Elementary, again, we have 2 acres there, so it's actually a little bit smaller than the east property. The reason that we have more green space there is because the city, and this picture was not updated, but towards the bottom of the picture, if you're familiar, yep, thank you. If you're familiar with that, that is the city's property. And we contacted them a few years ago to try and alleviate some of the parking pains that we had because a lot of our staff parked on the road. We developed that into a parking lot, so we actually have a decent parking lot for staff and parents now. But the reason that we have more green space there is because we don't have our own parking lot there even. The agreement with the city works out good. I'm not complaining about that. I just want to point that out, that we've got creative in order to keep more green space there. But again, still not near enough green space based on the research that would tell you how much green space you need per kid for those age groups.
Can I ask one more question? How much is needed?
I don't have those numbers in front of me. I did do a report on that. I can pull that up and provide that next meeting.
Okay, that'd be great, thank you.
Can you note that, Michelle? Thank you. Okay, West Elementary, the 4 acres is about twice the size of North. Obviously, we have Schofield Stadium there as well, and then across the road, we do have a big green space that we own. It's not on this map, but it's straight south at the bottom. I have, what Joel asked for is that we have all the square footage of green space versus hardscape playground. I can present that at another time to explain that more, but the point of that is we have enough green space at that site for what we need. Again, these are going to be a lot of the same comments as I read for East. One of the design features that maybe I should, I do want to point out, I missed that on the last one. The roof was modified from a flat roof to a truss roof around 1981. the existing roof design and materials have caused a lot of issues. What they basically did is they ripped off the roof membrane and they put wood framed trusses on top of a flat roof. And when they did that, they did not design a way for ventilation to come from under the soffit through the attic space and out the ridge vent. What they did instead is, if you look at the picture on the left, you see that black line.
I can be Vanna, yeah, that's right here. That's all, that's a cut.
That's literally a 2-inch hole that's cut. The entire length of our roofs on all 3 elementary buildings,
On both sides.
on both sides.
So what does it do?
That was in lieu of the soffit vent. So since they couldn't find a way, which I don't want to get into that, but they couldn't find a way to get soffit venting into the attic, they went, because there's, on a flat roof, you have the block wall on the outside is called a parapet wall, that goes up. They couldn't find a way to get over that parapet wall with proper venting. They should have designed the truss differently to allow that, but they didn't, so now we're stuck with the trusses that we have, right? So they went inside that parapet wall and cut a hole in our roof. So, when we have, little to no insulation in that ceiling anymore because they blew insulation in there, but when you need to get up there for servicing needs for, data wires that we've had to run through there, electrical conduits, heating pipes, we even have some air handling equipment up there. Over the years, that insulation just goes away, and we try our best to keep the insulation in place and fluffed up and doing its job, but if anybody's ever been in an attic, you know that that's a losing battle.
They should take a tour in that attic once.
We're going to North next week, Ted. And I'd love for you to help me. Ted used to be the custodian of that North for a number of years, and he will have a lot of insight to that. So what happened? Go ahead, Angie.
I just want to mention that this type of roof is on all 3 elementaries,
Yeah,
and all 3 have that
same issue.
cut, yeah.
So what happens is then we get heat loss creates into melted snow. When the melted snow runs to the edge of your eave, it freezes and there dams up water. And where do you think it's gonna find the easiest way to go in? That 2-inch hole that's cut the entire length of every roof. So then we have leaking in our buildings. So,
How
right,
long ago was that done?
the roofs were originally put on in
So the truss
The
roof?
trusses.
in 1981. The truss
Who was
roofs.
the architect of the job?
I don't recall who it was in 81.
I think it was Tracy. That happened over the years. 90% of our problems is because engineering of the buildings. That's where the problem comes from. If that roof was put on and properly engineered, you wouldn't have that problem.
Correct.
But we don't really know why we use some of these people, but I remember we had difficulty with one building, and the board is turning around trying to get the same architect to build another building. And I said, now, what kind of sense does that make anyway?
You couldn't be more right.
But let me just continue just a minute here.
Yep.
You talk about why some of this work wasn't done, Jake, is because the board does not have a budget, that's why.
Correct.
Now, tell me, I've been very critical of the budget over the years because the board does not have it, you can say all you want, but the board does not have any idea what they're doing. They have a $30 million budget that broke down into 16 lines. Now, anybody that's got any common sense knows you can't do that. You need 16 pages, not 16 lines. And that goes on year after year after year. And you can take a look at the budget that's published, and you've got 16 lines for a general fund. That's absolutely nonsense. Nobody can interpret that to say, this is how we're going to spend our money. All it does say is that we're going to spend it all. That's what it ever says. So until the board learns how to do a budget, they'll never correct this problem. Never. Because you can't possibly do that. You can't divide $30 million by 16 and come up with a number that's workable. doesn't work.
Good point, Troy. So, yeah, we have a lot of problems at our elementaries. They're not built properly. This picture on the right, and the one in the bottom center are another problem that we have, particularly at North. Ted probably knows what room this is.
Well, yeah.
So,
Swim in that room in the spring.
instead of, having a standard of construction that's consistent with a commercial building, we tried to make the best use of money at some point back in time when this addition went on. So essentially, we have a slab that's at the same grade as the asphalt outside, and they put a 2x4 on top of the concrete slab, and then we wonder why we have ice, or we have water running in between the slab and the 2x4. It's just not engineered, to Roy's point, it was not engineered properly from the get-go, and now we have these struggles. So we try everything we can do to seal it up and keep the water out. But everything from how the elevations were set up, to the construction of some of the additions, to the roofs that we put on them, it's just a completely inferior design and construction and building than we have with our middle school or high school. And that everywhere you turn in those buildings, you'll be able to see that, and we'll go through a tour on that, and I'll show you. The center middle picture is just a picture of, upper center picture is a picture of the heat tape that we have strung around the buildings to try and combat the ice damming, which then creates water that comes down on the ground and then goes under the wall. So it's a fun cycle to fight every year, and causes us a lot of problems. This is a chart that they came up with in the CISA report to show the estimated life of certain systems or fixtures or components of the building versus the actual age. And what I want you to kind of just focus on, not necessarily what these different items are, but this first black line here is what they call 100%. So that means that that item is 100% of its expected life. The second line is 200%. That means that that's 2 times its expected life. So when you look at these blue graphs, we have some things that are past 3 times their expected life. Many of them are at or past 100%. There's a few that are shy of 100%, but not many.
10 years ago.
And
Yeah.
this was 10 years
Yeah.
ago, was when this chart was designed. So, my point is, these buildings in every way are just, they need a pile of work, and even if we put that money into them, we still don't have a facility that's conducive to today's educational requirements. So when you ask, what would that cost, Joel? That's why it's hard to give you an answer, because I would never recommend to try and spend that amount of money on that building to even try and bring them up. Because at the end of the day, we still don't have the environment that we need to educate kids. Tom?
I just got one question. So when you're going through the amount of kids per north, east, and west, are they around 213 kids? Is what I see?
Roughly, yeah. We're gonna expand on enrollment numbers
Okay.
and capacities. We'll touch on it a little bit tonight, but we'll talk about that more. That's a whole nother night. I'm sure you're getting tired of me talking already, but
I was just kind of curious, how many are at the middle school as a whole, and then how many are at these 3 elementary schools?
yeah, in general, we got, say 2,000 kids, and we got probably average class size in the high school is around that 180 to 200.
I'm just talking about the elementary and the middle.
Okay,
The ones.
so you're talking 150, so Yeah, you're 180 to 200 kids in the elementaries. Donna, is that pretty
Yeah, I would
close?
say we're probably all three buildings, all three elementaries. Enrollment, current enrollment is probably between 170 and 190 right now.
And then the middle school, I think, Heather,
We're just under 500 right now.
Tom, right around 500 at the middle school.
500 at the middle school. Okay.
So, but we're gonna break that down a little bit more. We just decided to kind of break that out at another night. Any other questions on things we've talked?
Do you have the projected enrollments in each school for the coming
Yes,
school year?
yep, and we're gonna cover that. I don't know if it'll be next task force meeting, but that's gonna be a big conversation. That's gonna be very important, so we chose not to cover that tonight. I just wanna give you a snapshot of the conditions that we're talking about, and then we gotta dive into that though, for sure. So we have,
As a point of information, this is all history, if you don't mind. We had 3 elementary schools, you know, that were, or was it 4? It was rural schools. When those were closed, that was gonna solve all of our financial problems. The problems never went away. And when I was on the board in the 1970s, we had 4,500 kids in school. 4,500. Our state aid was at 50%. So times have changed so much, and I'm not saying it's anybody's fault, but about the same time, we had 1,100 dairy farms in Langley County. Now we got a handful. So the whole picture has changed dramatically. So I think when we look at this in a whole picture, we got to keep in mind that things keep on changing and changing. And if we could see what the future looked like, we'd know exactly what to do.
Right.
But we've come a long ways down. I remember one time we had a heated argument. We were going to build a senior high school for 5,000 students. Until we had a rude awakening that our population was going to go down to 3,000, and everybody thought we were crazy. But come to think of it, actually, we went down where we at now, because we never counted
about to,
pre-kindergarten at all, and kindergarten was optional. So when we talk about 4,000 kids, that does not include either one of those. So we've come a long ways down, but we never did, I think, learn how to back up.
I like how you say stuff, right? Capacity study, I touched on this a little bit.
I'm just coming to make you nervous, I didn't mean to, yeah.
And I want to spend a little bit more time on this, and we will with the enrollment and the projections and the birth rates and all that, and we will cover that. But the capacity study that I referenced, we had Bray Architects come in and help us with this. This was something that the board really wanted me to focus on and try to get an answer to help guide us through this. And without going too much into detail, the general way that we went about it is to provide the learning environments that these kids deserve nowadays. It's a different type of construction than what our elementary buildings are, that our middle school buildings are, and even our high school buildings have changed. So we wanted to look, if we were to house the number of kids that we do at each building and design a building to put those kids into, so say North Elementary has 200 kids, 4K through 3 right now. If we were to build a new building to put those 200 kids directly into, what would we end up with today? So that was kind of the premise of the exercise, to understand what square footage we're talking about in comparison to our current buildings. And the results of doing those exercises found that our high school is slightly, now that we have 8th grade up to the high school, would be slightly overpopulated per the numbers, but still reasonable to do so. The middle school is slightly underpopulated, but not to a level that we could just automatically add another grade. But then when we got to our elementary schools, Currently, they're roughly 22,000 square feet each. Each one of those buildings, if we kept the grade configurations and the students configured the way that they are right now, the building to be designed would be 60,000 square feet. That's 3 times the size of what our buildings currently are. Now, I kind of pushed back on Bray and I said, well, I don't necessarily buy that. You know, the board definitely had their pushback on that, so I said, okay, let's try to cut some fat off and be realistic here. I think that maybe there's a little bit of fat on here, and as we went through that, we could maybe get down to 50,000 square feet. But again, our buildings are 22,000 square feet, so they're half the size they need to accommodate the way we teach kids in 2023.
So we're talking about the space and the learning environment. So if we were to build a brand new spanking new building for the elementary, where would we put that in our town?
That's a lot of discussion. In my personal opinion, any way that you can get a campus system set up is going to gain you efficiencies. But there's lots of hurdles and pros and cons and discussion to come on that.
Right, because if we're gonna build the building and the foundation, just like our roads, is going to have to be just as good, let me back up. Our buildings are just gonna have to be good as our foundation, because if our foundation is not good, you know.
Right. No, you're exactly right. I know where you're going with that, and I want to get more into that, because that's a lot funner conversation than the stuff we just covered. But in the interest of time, I think we're gonna reserve that for another night. And where we want to get to with this task force is we want to decide, I think in my mind, the first step that we have to decide is are the buildings that we currently have okay? Are we okay with the learning environments that they provide for our kids the way they are? Or do we need to look at building something new? That's the first question. And then if we answer that, then we can go down that road, Joel, and I hope we can. I enjoy talking about that all the
Ultimately,
time.
it's the community's decision.
Correct. Yep. And that's what we're trying to do, is educate the community. So, with that, I'm gonna stop talking. I'm sure you're tired of hearing me.
No, this is great. You're a good spokesperson for all of that. So if we look at the agenda and what we've done with Jake here is taken a really deep dive into like the structure, right, of our facilities. But we've talked about how today's teaching and learning looks really different for kids than it, did when these buildings were first constructed. And so we wanted to take that kind of feedback from the staff and from what we heard from the community and compile that information for you. I think you're gonna get some other nuggets of information, if you will, to help you prioritize from that. And so again, I used an artificial intelligence tool that we use at the Donovan Group to synthesize all that. And it's always kind of interesting to me to see what gets pushed out. And so one of the first priorities that came out, or themes from that analysis, was there's a capacity issue, right? So capacity and enrollment management is one of the things that came out. So one of the things that we heard from staff and communities that we need to address: capacity issues, classroom sizes, balancing student numbers across buildings is crucial to ensure that there's equitable education opportunities, meaning that if a student goes to North Elementary and receives services there, that a student with same needs would be serviced the same way at West Elementary or East Elementary. Some other themes, or the reason the themes and priorities are important, is that it just provides you that list of school facility concerns, that there are several recurring themes that emerged and that can help you prioritize. So some of the other ones that came up: space allocation and flexibility. And we included here some pictures But dedicated spaces are needed for intervention teachers, specials like art, music, and STEAM. That middle picture, these are from my phone. That middle picture is a STEAM classroom, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And it really, from my lens, and I'm not a staff member here, and I travel all over the country and work with schools. That looks like a normal classroom to me. It doesn't look like a STEAM classroom to me from my lens. Because I'm looking for technology. I'm looking for hands-on, lots of stuff to play with science, right? And same with art. So that's something that, we'll work to share with you. What do some of these spaces look like in 2023 and other places? Also, we heard that there needs to be just dedicated spaces for special education services, that's lacking, and that of course affects the quality of instruction and student experience. So when you look at this classroom space, well, it's a collaboration space here on the right-hand side. You can see that there's servicing, for students in these areas where they're also storing stuff. On the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a need for flexible spaces to accommodate various activities. Here you can see that there's classroom instruction happening in the cafeteria, right? So, which is also the gym. So these are things that the buildings are struggling with. And all the pictures that you're seeing, by the way, are from the elementary schools right now. Another theme that popped up was safety and accessibility, and this is something we heard Jake talk about a lot. There's a lot of safety concerns that are presented by the water leakage in the buildings, inadequate lighting, lack of emergency exits came up, malfunctioning locks on doors, indicating that there's a need for just building safety upgrades. And then, this question, it kind of goes back to your code question, that there's some accessibility issues, including ADA compliance. I love this, well, I don't love it, but the pictures of the restrooms here show that they're not up to code for students who have disabilities or individuals with disabilities. Wheelchair accessibility is an issue in a number of areas, proper restrooms, and consistency are mentioned. You see here just the state of sinks even, and that students have to step up to access those sinks, and I'm sure there's water issues with those as well. Health and comfort was another theme. Heating and cooling problems, humidity, lack of proper ventilation, and issues with water temperature impact student comfort and concentration. Jake can tell you that hole in the wall there, that's because you can't access the old pipes, so, like in a way that makes sense, so we're breaking into walls to get to things. Health concerns are related to water quality and toxins in the water supply have been raised, emphasizing the importance of safe and healthy learning environments. Now this picture in the middle shows water leakage from the roof. You can also see there's a storage issue. But on the right-hand side, do you want to just talk a little bit about that picture, Jake? Because that's a really compelling story, I think, for people to understand.
So that picture is again at North Elementary. It's the same room that they constructed, that they put the 2x4 wall on top of the concrete pad where the water runs underneath. When they put that addition on, instead of breaking up the existing building's floor to tie into the plumbing utilities, they decided that they'd just find a way to go overhead or whatever they could. So to get the sink that you see on the right-hand side of that picture to drain, they put a sump pump, and they didn't even put it in the ground. They put it just in the closet, sitting on the floor. And then they pump that up and over through another classroom to get into another drainage pipe. That's the stuff where when we talk, Joel, about, construction quality and making the right decisions, things like that are crazy.
Yeah, that's a good story for communicating out to the community so people understand, right? Student services and support became a big theme, so I point to your person here. Special education services are often compromised due to insufficient space to provide services, noise disruptions, lack of confidentiality, a need for sensory rooms. Sensory rooms are for students who need a calming space. Privacy for meetings and appropriate storage, of course, for student materials is evident. The picture here on the right just shows, how your staff is really doing the best that they can with what they have, and trying to provide those intimate spaces to provide those critical services. Traffic and circulation came up, definitely about drop off and pickup, for safety, but also congested corridors in your facilities and traffic flow. That was a consistent theme across all the schools, indicating the importance of efficient circulation plans, both outside and internal. And this picture shows the narrow passageway that students have to take to get their food from the lunch line. Yeah, Angie?
I just want to say, like the elementary schools don't have like full kitchens, so our kids are eating, the food has to be transferred from the high school to them, and by the time the kids go through and get to the lunch line, they're eating soggy food, barely lukewarm food, and that's what their lunch is every day, because we don't have the proper kitchens in the elementaries.
Thank you for that, yeah. Technology and infrastructure came up also, just outdated technology infrastructure, including lighting, electrical systems, the PA systems, HVAC. Yeah, requires some modern help here, right? And then aesthetic and environmental improvements too. The schools, like the staff there, they desire visual improvements. I think it goes to the curb appeal like you were talking about before. When we drop off kids at school, we want them to be excited about being there. This does reflect your community, and so being attractive was something that we heard, right? So also along with that, environmental sustainability was a concern. So just creating those attractive, welcoming spaces. The pictures I include here, I walk into the gym, at one of your elementary schools, and it makes me sad to see that, that this is the kind of basketball hoop they have. And this one actually had a basketball hoop. There were others that were handmade. And then on the right-hand side, this is a front office, but you also are using it to take care of 6 students with that cot there. So that's not really welcoming. Like, welcome to our school. We have a sick student here, or an all-day student. So, and that's not good for the student, right, and their family. And that's common, unfortunately, in a lot of schools across the country. We need better spots for students to be treated. Collaboration and meeting spaces came up often, particularly with your staff, just needing dedicated spaces, collaboration rooms, staff lounges, all that's been emphasized to foster teacher collaboration, communication, and well-being. So again, you're just seeing how everything's kind of crammed together here. Storage and organization is a big issue for you all, with inadequate space for that, lack of proper organization. Jake pointed out this nice piece of equipment that you have to upkeep the facilities and keep them clean is stored in the children's bathroom. So you can think about, if you have a child who's mischievous, it can create some pretty significant damage to your high quality equipment that you do have. You see here on the right-hand side that there's services being provided for students who need reading intervention. You have storage of their materials in like what used to be like secretary's office. And so, again, your staff is doing the best that they can. But if I'm a student who's struggling with reading, this isn't going to be a very welcoming place for me to come and grow and flourish. And then recreational and outdoor spaces, we've talked quite a bit about tonight with your green spaces. They just need attention, including proper fencing and safety measures. I love the naughty picture here on the left that just shows the really sad basketball hoop, right, in front of the football field. I think we can do better for our kids. So where we go next is prioritization. And I'm going to turn it over to Danny and Angie to do that. But prioritizing these areas based on urgency, impact, and also the resources available can help guide where we go, right, in terms of improving our school facilities. Oh, and Dave, that's right, Dave is gonna do this, that's
You want
right.
me to do this?
Yes, I'm sorry about that, Dave.
Okay. Was it Tim? Tom, I want to explain one more thing to the group. I was a superintendent at Whitburn when that formula went in.
Dave,
When the formula went in, if you were a conscientious district, meaning their board, keeping the taxes down, which was in Whitburn, which was here, for lack of a better word, you were screwed right from the start. Because when I said we're going from 10,000 to 11,000 in this district this year, 10,000 was the minimum amount that the state gives a school per child. There were schools getting 20,000. Because they looked at what you spend in '89, if '90 was the year, what you spent as a district in '89 became your starting point in 1990. And the districts that were spending, 18,000 per kid, well, they started at 18,000. And us, in especially northern Wisconsin, if we were getting, and let's say they started at 8,000, if we were spending 7,500 per kid, oh, we got a $500 raise to 8,000, but those ones that were spending a lot more, that's where they started. And it continues today. So we've been behind forever. I was at every one of the 5. I felt a responsibility to be there because it was my idea to have this task force. Because some days I do actually think like a superintendent.
Never leaves you, right?
No, it doesn't. Anyway, I knew we needed a plan. And I had seen enough over the couple of years I've been on the board, and I really truly believe the high school's in pretty good shape. Yeah, we have some things we have to do. Like Jake said, it's going to be 30 years old. The middle school, some people would not think that that's the best place. Maybe that's what we should have torn down, but as Jake said, that has the body from the beginning because it was built with walls this thick and that kind of stuff. It's going to be there forever. And as a board, we've just committed $3 million for brand new windows. So that's staying. So now we're back to talking, and I think this is where we have to go, is with these 3 elementary buildings that were built in the 60s. And again, I've told the teachers, we have 3 buildings that are crap. We need, and you need to understand, I'm a conservative. I don't like to spend money. This district needs to. And I am fully committed to building a new school, whether it's 4K4 or 4K5, whatever. But we need to do something. We need to attract people to come back to here. I have a sheet for each school. It's fully done with my notes. I actually highlighted, but we're running out of time because we're supposed to be there done at 8 o'clock. Okay? But there's some things, and they went through them. Now, I was on the WIA Board of Control, so athletics is important to me for school districts. And so when I look at us, it's not what we see. It's what do the other parents from the other schools see when they come here. And our facilities aren't that good. And our pavement isn't very good for them to park in. So I'm concerned about that. We need to make things look better. Another thing that came out that wasn't mentioned is that we have a lot of mothers who have a baby come back into our district to start teaching again, and they're pumping to feed their baby. We don't have facilities for them. That came through in a couple schools of the 5 that, you know, they're pumping when somebody opened the door. You know, that's not good for our teachers. We need to somehow come up with spots where they can feel that they can go and do that and are not going to be interrupted. And then I had a bunch listed with elementaries, and you've heard these, and they're important. Space. We don't have enough space. Bathroom issues. One school has one bubbler. Think of lining up 25 kids that are second graders to try to go through that one water fountain. How long is that going to take? How long is it going to take when the girls walk in and there's 3 stalls? How long is it going to take for that class to get everybody to the bathroom on their break? They just, I mean, yeah, they were built in 1960. Special ed wasn't like it is now. Kids weren't getting pulled out to go in other spots. Music, art, library on a cart. Because we don't have facilities where a kid, as a class, can go into an art room and have art, where it's special, and your teachers are left back in their classroom able to do prep work or go get a cup of coffee in their classroom. Eating in classrooms. Angie already talked about it's not warm. Heard that in every elementary school because they're shipping it in from the high school. They're having phy ed in the gym. So as soon as it gets there, they can't serve the kids. So that's an issue. There's electrical issues, there's storage issues, there's playground issues. There's all kinds of issues. And like I said, I'm conservative, I don't like to spend money. But if we're going to be, as Danny says, a destination district, we're going to have to spend some money. And we're going to have to go to referendum to get it done. My hope, as I talked to the teachers, was every time a referendum has been run in this school district, they were told, if you do not do this, we're going to close that school out there. And it would fail, and they closed 2 schools. And that went on for a number of years. Do you really think the people that are not in the city trust the school district? Well, they were told the truth by the board, but they closed them because they didn't pass. And so I'm hopeful that because we as the board and the administration went to the teachers and said, what's the problems with your rooms? What's the problem with your buildings? And Jake did a tremendous job tonight, and he's been so on top of this, trying to get information for this task force. But I want this, when it's done, that the teachers in this building, or in our buildings, and our administration and our board, go to the polls. Tell their friends. You know, I heard my favorite son-in-law. I only have one, and I say that with the fact that sometimes he's my least favorite, but not very, very often. He was looking at the pictures and he said, this is a disgrace, under his breath. And he's right. We can do better. And so it's where if we can get the school people involved and say, yes, we need to do this. And your job as you go forward, in the end, you're going to make a decision, and maybe you're not going to do what I just said. I will support whatever the task force comes up with, and I don't vote with what you guys come up with for a decision that you're going to tell us. Whatever you come up with, I'm going to support. I'll support it at the board level, and I'm going to support it at the ballot box. But this task force, when you come up with your plan, you need to go out to the public. We need to let them know how bad our facilities are and what we need to do to become a destination district and get some of those millions of dollars that we're sending to Wittenberg, Burnhamwood, and other places back in there, and have room to bring those kids back, because right now we don't have room to bring them back. So, that's my spiel, Joel. I'm done talking, and I'm not doing it anymore with you tonight, because it's 4 minutes to 8, we're done at 8, and I gotta let Angie talk.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. So just to kind of piggyback off of what Dave said about the referendum, that could be for a new school building, that could be for operating costs or anything like that. Now, in the past, I'll fully admit, I voted against every single referendum that they ever put towards us. Reason being, because they didn't give us the information that we're trying to show you with this task force. We're gonna take you on tours, we're gonna show you pictures. We talked to all of the, the staff and families, and that wasn't done in the past. And so I think in order for anything to be, I guess, sold, if you will, to this community, we need to have the community's buy-in from the get-go. We can't come to them and say, nope, we think we need a new school. That doesn't work. That hasn't worked in the past, it's not gonna work now, because people don't want their taxes raised if they don't understand why it's necessary. And again, I voted no against every single one, and then once I got on the school board, I toured all the schools, and I saw just how bad things were. David talked about lunches, right? And one thing I thought was, okay, well, they're eating lunch in the classroom. What's the big deal, right? There is a big deal, because then they don't know how to interact with everybody all together, and then they go to the middle school, and everybody's all together, and now there's huge behavioral problems, right? So it's just like one thing leads to another to another. And I would like to see that the district become more forward-thinking. Not only are we going to plan our kids for, teach them for today's world, but also the future. And that's something that we are not doing now. I feel like as a parent that we are stuck, 20 plus years ago still. And whether this means that this task force comes up that we need a new building, we need a new school, we need to have a major addition to a school or major remodeling or whatever, we're going to fully back whatever comes out of this. And that's why we wanted to bring a task force together of everybody from the community. And like Dave said, once we decide, we need help getting out and talking to the community and letting them know why. We'll do a marketing campaign as well, but we need you talking to friends, family, neighbors, and things of that nature. And that's what I'm hoping this task force can do.
Andy, can you just clarify, because that's one of the questions I had, so there will be a marketing campaign that sort of expresses the recommendations of the task force?
Great question, great question. That's a great segue too, to hand it off to me that way. So like we heard before, one of the priorities and implications of our work is being very transparent with communications about the work of this task force, and starting that right away here. But then as you come forward and present recommendations to the board and the board takes action, we support that, the Diamond Group, with, we don't really call it marketing at that point, but we're informing. We're informing your community about this work, the priorities of the board, and heads up community, we're gonna probably come for a referendum ask, right? And so starting to bring people along with that, once we get to a point, if we get to a point, and once we get there, and they're going to put a ballot question out there, then we don't really call it marketing at that point, we call it an engagement campaign. And we try to engage as many people as possible within your community to understand the needs, why the board is coming forward with this proposed solution as a referendum, and try to just get people to own, go back to your word, ownership, to own that solution so that hopefully they'll vote the way you need them to vote. That's how that works, yep. And we help with all that, we do all that work for you.
Just one thing that I think we need to be mindful of, I'm a county board supervisor, my husband's on the school board. These are all entities, but we're of one.
Yeah,
And I think that's the thing, this is not a task force for facilities. This is a task force to promote Anago, Wisconsin, in Langlade County, Wisconsin. And that we need to work together and not be individual silos of power and finance, but what are we doing to promote us?
That's like a great TV ad, what you just said. You would be a great spokesperson.
No, I wouldn't.
But you have the passion, that's exactly right, you're absolutely spot on, you're spot on. So we want to honor our norms, so here's what we're going to do. Our next meeting is August 30th at 6 p.m. Initially, we were going to do that as like a remote meeting or a virtual meeting, but we want to give you a tour of the North Elementary School and use some of that time for that. So we're going to plan to meet at North Elementary School that night, okay? So again, August 30th at 6 p.m., that's on your agenda. And then there's a series of questions that I'm going to make homework for you. Danny thinks it's important you have homework. So I'm going to send a follow-up email that has a copy of the slide deck for you. It'll have a copy of the charge from the board for this task force. It'll have a little QR code that you scan with your phone that'll take you to a set of questions that you can enter your answers from your cell phone. And those questions that you'll be asked are here already on your agenda, so you can kind of think about how you want to respond to those. But it's really important that you do respond to those questions because that helps us with planning as we go into each of these meetings. And then I'll also be adding to that QR code, are there individuals who aren't here tonight that you think should be? So think about that too, okay? With that, we want to get you out here, and I just want to say thank you, and for your grace tonight to be here, giving up your time, like Glenda said, and this is probably the most important work that a number of you will take on over the next couple of months. So, anything?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to piggyback on Carol, what she said about the community ownership. The board members are voted by the community, obviously. And some people have the attitude, well, I voted you in, you do the work. This is not the work of the board all together by itself. We want your help, and that's why Dave has dreamt this idea. But I think it's great that we're going down this avenue. There's a lot of areas that we're going to be talking about as we're going forward. Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, all of those things will also be discussed through this task force as we're going forward. So keep all of those things in mind. I do want to point out a lot of our administration is here tonight. And I just want to say from my seat, thank you for all of your hard work and your staff and your buildings, because you make happen school every day in what we just saw that Travis, I heard Travis's, one of his words was embarrassing, besides what the other word that Dr. Bartle heard. But so, yeah, thank you so much for all the hard work and the creativity that you guys do every day in all of these buildings. And then thanks for all the task force members that are here tonight, and those that are coming along the board but are coming along the task force that are not here, but they will be coming along. Respond, talk to Lori. She's given you her email and she's facilitating this. She'll put questions together. You may say, I don't know what to ask a question in the room. Just send it to her. She'll ask it for you without even anybody knowing it came from you. So let's do this as we're going forward. Thank you so much for your time and your energy. Our kids will appreciate this, and we will become that destination district.